A reading from the book of Numbers, chapter 19. The Lord commanded Moses and Aaron to give the Israelites the following regulations. Bring to Moses and Aaron a red cow which has no defects and which has never been worked, and they will give it to Eleazar the priest. It is to be taken outside the camp and killed in his presence. Then Eleazar is to take some of its blood and with his finger sprinkle it 7 times in the direction of the tent. The whole animal, including skin, meat, blood, and intestines, is to be burned in the presence of the priest. Then he is to take some cedar wood, a sprig of hyssop, and a red cord and throw them into the fire. After that, he is to wash his clothes and pour water over himself, and then he may enter the camp. But he remains ritually unclean until evening. The one who burned the cow must also wash his clothes and pour water over himself, but he also remains unclean until evening. Then someone who is ritually clean is to collect the ashes of the cow and put them in a ritually clean place outside the camp, where they are to be kept for the Israelite community to use in preparing the water for removing ritual uncleanness. This ritual is performed to remove sin. The one who collected the ashes must wash his clothes, but he remains unclean until evening. This regulation is valid for all time to come, both for the Israelites and for the foreigners living among them. Those who touch a corpse are ritually unclean for 7 days. They must purify themselves with the water for purification on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and then they will be clean. But if they do not purify themselves on both the 3rd and the 7th day, they will not be clean. Those who touch a corpse and do not purify themselves remain unclean, because the water for purification has not been thrown over them. They defile the Lord's tent, and they will no longer be considered God's people. In the case of a person who dies in a tent, anyone who is in the tent at the time of death or who enters it becomes ritually unclean for 7 days. Every jar and pot in the tent that has no lid on it also becomes unclean. If any touch a person who has been killed or has died a natural death outdoors, or if any touch a human bone or a grave, they become unclean for 7 days. To remove the uncleanness, some ashes from the red cow, which was burned to remove sin, shall be taken and put in a pot, and fresh water added. In the first case, someone who is ritually clean is to take a sprig of hyssop, dip it in the water, and sprinkle the tent, everything in it, and the people who were there. In the second case, someone who is ritually clean is to sprinkle the water on those who had touched the human bone or the dead body or the grave. On the 3rd day and on the 7th day, the person who is ritually clean is to sprinkle the water on the unclean persons. On the 7th day, he is to purify those who, after washing their clothes and pouring water over themselves, become ritually clean at sunset. Those who have become ritually unclean and do not purify themselves remain unclean, because the water for purification has not been thrown over them. They defile the Lord's tent and will no longer be considered God's people. You are to observe this rule for all time to come. The person who sprinkles the water for purification must also wash his clothes. Anyone who touches the water remains ritually unclean until evening. Whatever an unclean person touches is unclean, and anyone else who touches it remains unclean until evening. The word of the Lord. A reading from the book of Numbers, chapter 20. In the first month, the whole community of Israel came to the wilderness of Zin and camped at Kadesh. There Miriam died and was buried. There was no water where they camped, so the people gathered around Moses and Aaron and complained, "It would have been better if we had died in front of the Lord's tent along with the other Israelites. Why have you brought us out into this wilderness? Just so that we can die here with our animals? Why did you bring us out of Egypt into this miserable place where nothing will grow? There's no grain, no figs, no grapes, no pomegranates. There is not even any water to drink." Moses and Aaron moved away from the people and stood at the entrance of the tent. They bowed down with their faces to the ground, and the dazzling light of the Lord's presence appeared to them. The Lord said to Moses, "Take the stick that is in front of the covenant box, and then you and Aaron assemble the whole community. There in front of them all, speak to that rock over there, and water will gush out of it. In this way, you will bring water out of the rock for the people, for them, and their animals to drink." Moses went and got the stick as the Lord had commanded. He and Aaron assembled the whole community in front of the rock, and Moses said, "Listen, you rebels. Do we have to get water out of this rock for you?" Then Moses raised the stick and struck the rock twice with it, and a great stream of water gushed out, and all the people and animals drank. But the Lord reprimanded Moses and Aaron. He said, "Because you did not have enough faith to acknowledge my holy power before the people of Israel, you will not lead them into the land that I promised to give them." This happened at Meribah, where the people of Israel complained against the Lord, and where he showed them that he is holy. Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. They said, "This message is from your kinsmen, the tribes of Israel. You know the hardships we have suffered, how our ancestors went to Egypt, where we lived many years. The Egyptians mistreated our ancestors and us, and we cried to the Lord for help. He heard our cry and sent an angel who led us out of Egypt. Now we are at Kadesh, a town at the border of your territory. Please permit us to pass through your land. We and our cattle will not leave the road or go into your fields or vineyards, and we will not drink from your wells. We will stay on the main road until we are out of your territory." But the Edomites answered, "We refuse to let you pass through our country. If you try, we will march out and attack you." The people of Israel said, "We will stay on the main road, and if we or our animals drink any of your water, we will pay for it. All we want is to pass through." The Edomites repeated, "We refuse." And they marched out with a powerful army to attack the people of Israel. Because the Edomites would not let the Israelites pass through their territory, the Israelites turned and went another way. The whole community of Israel left Kadesh and arrived at Mount Hor on the border of Edom. There the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Aaron is not going to enter the land which I promised to give to Israel. He is going to die, because the two of you rebelled against my command at Meribah. Take Aaron and his son Eleazar up Mount Hor, and there remove Aaron's priestly robes and put them on Eleazar. Aaron is going to die there. Moses did what the Lord had commanded. They went up Mount Hor in the sight of the whole community, and Moses removed Aaron's priestly robes and put them on Eleazar. There, on the top of the mountain, Aaron died, and Moses and Eleazar came back down. The whole community learned that Aaron had died, and they all mourned for him for 30 days. The word of the Lord.